on Book TV.
In Hating Whitey, columnist David Horowitz criticizes what he calls progressive ideas about problems facing minorities. He also criticizes the civil rights movement for supporting preferential treatment programs. Book TV taped Mr. Horowitz when he talked about his book on a radio program hosted by Bob Grant in New York City. This discussion lasts a little under an hour.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next senator from the great state of New Jersey, Bob Grant.
I thank you. I thank you very much. It's a great night here as we celebrate. No. Better not get carried away. Straight ahead, everyone. Here we are with round 3 of our get-together, the Bob Grant Show, coast to coast, border to border. As we like to say in our self-serving way, often imitated, never duplicated. And I'm delighted to tell you that he is here. David Horowitz. I was about to refer to him as the man of the hour because it seems as though so many people want to interview him, so many people want to have him on the program, and I'm delighted that he's spending this time with us. You may remember last week we talked to him on the telephone about his latest book entitled Hating Whitey and Other Progressive Causes, and a lot of you folks responded by saying you had called Barnes & Noble, you had asked them about the book, and we had a gentleman calling yesterday saying he was able to get the book with no problem in a city in New Jersey, but he did not call Barnes & Noble. I believe he said it was Walden Books. Anyway, the author of Radical Son and now Hating Whitey, a man who is got to be very busy because in addition to the books, he's also the president of the for the study of popular culture in Los Angeles, and the editor of the journal Heterodoxy. And a lot of the people over there on the left have you between their crosshairs, David Horowitz.
Really, they're kind of foaming at the mouth, Bob. You know, the title, I picked the title, Hating Whitey, because it was provocative, but also because it just shows up the hypocrisy of liberalism. It's because it's not okay. It's really the worst crime anybody can commit to hate a group in America, which is it's proper that we should condemn intolerance, except for white people and white males. And what this does is this blaming white people for every problem that minorities experience, aside from being a libel on white America, takes people's minds off the real problems. As you know, I got into trouble last month by writing a column about the NAACP's latest so-called civil rights cause, which was to sue gun manufacturers because too many blacks are getting killed by guns in the inner city. Well, yeah, but the problem is that too many young black males are killing them. You know, lots of people get guns and don't go out and kill people. In fact, you know, 90, whatever it is, 8% of us don't do that. What liberals, you know, liberals are about contempt is what they have, apparently, for minorities, and blacks in particular. Or just call it, you know, a patronizing disdain. Because what the NAACP is saying, really, is, you know, black people can't really handle guns. They don't know how to take care of them. They don't know how to have a gun without shooting each other. You know, this is insanity. It's ludicrous. And yet the mainstream press, not just the mainstream press, I would say most people are intimidated from pointing out the obvious, which is that the NAACP has gone off the deep end here because they don't want to be called racists, which is what the NAACP will do in their own defense. And of course, that's exactly what happened to me. Time magazine called me a racist. Well, actually, it wasn't Time. It was a black reporter for Time named Jack White, who, when he isn't busy demanding reparations and 40 acres and a mule, is attacking people like me. Julian Bond, the head of the NAACP, called me a 60s turncoat. And that highlights the true hypocrisy of people like Julian Bond and what's called liberals today, because I am very consistent on the race issue with where I was in the 60s. I, was one of the people who supported Martin Luther King and marched in those marches and picketed the Woolworths in the name of a single standard for all people, a colorblind standard for the government, tolerance towards all people. And it's Julian Bond and the NACP that's done a 180-degree turn and now supports the position of the crackers. They support the segregationist position, which is the segregationists wanted the governments in the South to discriminate on the basis of skin color. And that's exactly what Bill Clinton's administration does. That's what Bill Land-Lee, the so-called acting attorney general for civil rights, does. That's what the EEOC does. They're all discriminating on the basis of race. And that's why the NACP defends racial boxes in the census. The racial boxes being, of course, black, white, Asian, and Hispanic, and I guess Pacific Islander. People like myself would like to see an end to racial boxes. We'd like to go back to the idea that we should judge people regardless of their race, color, or creed. But it's the NACP that wants, if you have one drop of black blood, they want to call you black. It's like Tiger Woods, who is only 1/8 black. He has more white blood in him if we get into this really distressing kind of, logic. I think he's something like half Korean. He calls himself a Kablanasian, but of course the black, we call them nationalists or separatists, but if they were white, they would be called racists. They want Tiger Woods to be labeled black, and they want everybody to be labeled in their particular boxes. And that's because the government doles out all kinds of goodies on the basis of race. This is exactly what happened in the segregationist South, and that's why we fought against it. And it's exactly what happened in South Africa, and that's why we fought against it. But now it's liberal orthodoxy. And anyway, that's why I picked the title Hating Whitey and Other Progressive Causes, because it's the progressives in our culture who are the true reactionaries today, defending these outdated, outmoded, and retrograde positions.
David, do you see any hope for a change from this mindset, this politically correct straitjacket we're in?
Well, hating Whitey is my effort to do something about it. I think it's time to, stand up and say the obvious. When the NACP makes a fool of itself, which it has done with this gun suit, of course, the previous civil rights cause was crack dealers. They get 2 harsh sentences. I mean, if crack is bad for the community, if crack is bad for people, it's good to give crack dealers heavy sentences. If there's some unfairness in that powder cocaine dealers don't get heavy enough sentences, give them the heavy sentences. But let's not talk about, try to reduce the sentences for crack dealers, which is what their civil rights cause is about. When you talk in terms of blaming white people for everything, you lose sight of the real problems. In education, we have this phrase institutional racism, that somehow institutional racism are keeping blacks out of college or keeping them from getting in the elite colleges. Yet, there are no racists to point at. I mean, it's not like anybody is saying the admissions officers at Harvard and Yale are racist and trying to keep blacks out. On the contrary, they're recruiting black students the way they recruit basketball players and baseball players. They're throwing, money at them, all kinds of lures to come. The reason black kids are not getting into elite colleges without having the system rigged for them is because they score poorly on the tests. So now the liberals and the left are attacking the tests. This is not going to help these black kids who are not getting up to grade. What's going to help them is to drop this mythology about institutional racism and start looking at the real problems, which is probably that not enough of them have fathers. 80% of black children are born out of wedlock in the inner city, 60% overall, to help them with their homework. and that there's an attitude in the black community, which Chris Rock makes stand-up comedy out of, which is that if you study hard, you're thinking white. This is a very destructive attitude, and this is what needs to be addressed. I mean, why doesn't the NAACP conduct a public campaign in the black community against the idea that studying hard is thinking white? I mean, well, obviously, they can't really do it because white people have to be blamed for everything. And, that's kind of the heart of the message in the first part of my book.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go public. As you know, we do take telephone calls. I'm addressing now the folks who watch C-SPAN. This is one of those infamous radio call-in programs, for the most part, peopled by those of us who are, let me use the lexicon that seems to be in vogue, on the extreme, hard, far-right fringe. You can't be a conservative anymore. Then we graduated to right-wingers, then we graduated to far right-wingers. Now, to really do us justice, you must address us as extreme hard right-wingers. In other words, you can't see the horns, the fangs, but they're there. Anyway, we're going to take a brief time out here, and then we're going to come back with telephone calls from wherever you may be. 1-800-321-8828. 1-800-321-8828 for our guest. And he is David Horowitz. His latest book, Hating Whitey and Other Progressive Causes. And if you haven't gotten a hold of this book yet, I strongly suggest you do so. We're going to take that brief break, and then we'll continue straight ahead.
So you're
Executive Vice President of the NRA.
We're getting all over the place with this.
Yep.
Recently, Newsweek magazine asked me what could be done about gun
I don't know
violence in
when.
America.
I don't know when they're going to
Stopping
show
violence
this.
is a goal we
They
all
don't know
share.
either.
Where we differ is how to achieve that goal. There's been a deliberate effort by this administration not to enforce the laws on the books. If you truly want
You're
to
going over to
eradicate
Time magazine when you
must
finish here?
confront criminals with guns directly. Confront the felons trying
You're
to
gonna
buy guns
confront
directly
Mr.
and
White?
get them off the street.
No,
If tomorrow morning
Mr.
Attorney
White,
General Janet Reno
actually, when
held a
this
press
thing was in
conference
the news
side by
and people,
side
a
with
lot
the
of shows
NRA
called him
and
and tried to get him on.
$100 million
He
for
didn't
additional
answer the phone.
enforcement to put
They had a
criminals
special
with
person
guns
that tried to
behind
answer the
bars.
phone for him.
I can
It's like
guarantee
Mr.
you
White
by
was not
tomorrow
available,
night,
right?
crime would be down.
And his representatives.
Tell him to demand strict enforcement of our existing.
What do we got
gun
here, 2
laws,
minutes,
not
or?
more restrictions on honest firearm owners. Call 202-225-3121. Call
Bob,
today,
do we have 2 minutes, or
because
how many
prosecution
minutes?
is prevention. Paid for by the National Rifle
How many
Association.
minutes break?
How many minutes is this?
Learn how to
Let's see. We have 3. I think we have 3 more to go.
Okay.
watch my dad make a total
Four
fool
more
of
to go.
himself talking about
You have time to do whatever you want to do.
Hey.
The number one deterrent to drug abuse is parents. And parents can fight drug abuse in any number of small personal ways every day. For more, call 800-788-2800 or visit theantidrug.com. Brought to you by ONDCP.
I like this woman in my building.
Hey, Roy,
so
I
wanted
don't
to do
know if,
something special for her
I don't
for
know if
Halloween.
David's
Suddenly
going
a
beyond
brilliant
the-
idea hit me. 1-800
the door.
flowers.com.
Yeah.
Of course.
I don't know
I
if
found the
David
perfect
is
thing.
trying to go
Crates of
beyond that
flowers
door. You know, he'll
arranged.
need that
Fall flowers with a nifty Halloween
electronic
theme starting
card
at
to
only
get back in.
$29.99.
I'm Jim McCann at 1-800-Flowers.com. We have hundreds of wonderful gifts and beautiful flowers. Visit us at 1-800-Flowers.com or call us at 1-800-Flowers.
Prices are exclusive of taxes, service, and shipping charges. Welcome to the Phonics Game Family Minute. With us is family film critic Holly McClure. Holly, as an advocate for families and a mom yourself, what's the hardest part about kids going back to school?
Not only have kids been entertained all summer with movies, videos, summer activities, and fun, but they've also taken a vacation from schoolwork. And for many children, that means falling behind or forgetting a lot of what they learned last year.
Is there anything concerned parents can do?
There is. Give your children a head start by ordering the Phonics Game. It's a series of fun games that teaches children the basic language skills they'll need for
What
all
happens
their
on
studies.
C-SPAN when
In
we have
fact,
the,
you'll see better grades in reading or
the
spelling
breaks?
on their next report card, or you get your
It
money
just
back.
runs.
That sounds like a promise and a guarantee.
It is.
Well, Well, are
Parents
we
make
on
this
the
a
air?
memorable year for
Or
your
is there no
children.
sound?
Give them
when
a
it
head
breaks the
start they'll
sound?
thank you for, and watch their grades and self-confidence soar.
So before
Call
the
the
nation,
Phonics
David
game at
Horowitz leaves to take a
800-383
kidney
game
break.
or visit the website at games2learn.com. 800-383-GAME. That's 800-383-GAME.
I actually got lost.
Meet Joe.
I never
He's
made
got
it.
problems. Problems with his job, problems with his boss, problems with his cubicle, his workload, his pay stub. He even has problems finding a parking space most days. But there is one thing Joe doesn't have problems with, his skin. Joe uses Physoderm. You see, Physoderm Daily Skin Cleanser is pH balanced. It gently deep cleans dirt and oil to prevent problem skin. Whether your skin is dry, oily, or sensitive, Physoderm has a formula for you. Meet Joe. He uses Physoderm.
We got calls there? Are there anybody online?
NASCAR
Oh, yeah.
driver
Oh, yeah.
Red Bodine talks
Anybody
about
hostile?
Gold Bond medicated powder.
The engine, the heat. 3 hours in a race car? Man, you need Gold Bond.
Dust,
Okay.
dirt, and heat are all
About
part of the
15
job,
seconds.
and they can really make your skin
Well,
hot.
where's that stand? We can put the book up when the stand is...
2 hours in here? You know hot itchy.
Triple Action Gold Bond powder absorbs moisture, refreshes your skin, and stops itch.
It's in the breaks. We'll put the book up on the stand.
Gold Bond works in these conditions. Think what it can do for you.
Triple Action Gold Bond.
The only thing I'm itching for is a checkered flag.
Use only as directed.
There we go.
We're going to go public now with our guest, David Horowitz. And we've got a lot of calls coming in for you, David, and that's the way it should be.
That's the way it always is on your show, Mom.
You bet. Okay. Ken in the car. Are you there, Ken?
Yes, I am.
Go right ahead with David Horowitz, Ken.
Thank you. Mr. Horowitz, I just wanted to ask you to comment on one observation that I've made, and that is that amongst whites, Jews seem to support black causes and the NAACP more than any other group, and yet there is more anti-Semitism amongst blacks than there is amongst whites. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think a lot of the problem here that I'm addressing, and that problem as well, is, I don't know, precipitated by the influence of the political left on the black community. Because the political left always sees things in a war situation. It's a class war, and now it's become a race war. And the left, part of my book, Hating Whitey, is about the tenured left and how they teach that America is a classist, racist, sexist society, and that white males are responsible for everything that's wrong in the world. And that provides an intellectual framework of hatred. That's what it's all about. And the striking thing, all the studies of the black anti-Semitism and black racism have shown that the higher the income levels, the more incidents of anti-Semitic prejudice and anti-white racism there are, which is very different from all other ethnic groups. And the only way I can explain this is that the black political and economic elite has gone to our universities, and particularly to our elite universities, and learned to be racist and anti-Semitic there. Of course, the Palestinian cause is considered to be a liberation struggle, in the same way the communist cause in Vietnam was considered to be a liberation struggle. And I think it's a definite incitement to these kind of attitudes. And of course, as a Jew, this troubles me greatly because Jews have extended themselves historically to black Americans in this country in greater measure than any group that I know of has ever extended itself to another group. Jews created, when the creators of the NAACP, Jews, a Jew named Jack Greenberg actually devised the integration strategy, which brought the famous suit to the Supreme Court. Jews, financed the civil rights movement. 50% of the white freedom riders who went south to help and give moral support and protection because they were white to the black civil rights workers, 50% of them were Jews, and Jews are only 3% of the population. That's how extraordinary the Jewish effort was. Of course, when Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman were killed, Schwerner and Goodman were Jews. Jews gave their lives in this struggle, and the casual anti-Semitic attacks from very educated black people who argue the Jews were only in the struggle. I mean, this is a Farrakhan line, but I've heard it from people who are not followers of Farrakhan. The Jews were only in the civil rights struggle for their own interest is, it's shameful. It's embarrassing and shameful. And there are some black intellectuals like Henry Louis Gates who have written about this, but in the main, it's just not dealt with.
All right. Thank you very much, Kent. Good question. Let's go to Newark, New Jersey. David checking in right now. He's on the telephone line with David Horowitz. Go ahead, David.
Yes, good evening, Bob. Good to speak to you. Mr. Horowitz,
yes, sir.
I want to commend you. I agree with you 1,010%. I'm a black American, and I work with CORE. And one of the things.
Roy and Niger Innes are friends of mine. Yeah.
Yes. Do you point out in your book that there is big lucrative business in hating Whitey? I'll give you a perfect example. A friend of mine who used to belong to Screwy Louis Farrakhan's so-called Nation of Islam told me that in all the hate and all the venom and all the racism that he's preaching, telling us that America has never been for us, that this is the most racist nation on earth. From what I understand from inside sources, this man is living high on the hog. He lives out in Chicago.
Well, of course, he lives like a king. I mean, all cult leaders do. So did Elijah Muhammad. I thought you were going to refer to the, Chris Rock's question to Jesse Jackson. What exactly do you do, Jesse? How did Jesse Jackson get to be a millionaire? He did it by exploiting the race issue. Even when I was a leftist, it offended me that Jackson was making money off, championing poor people. I don't ever remember taking a dime, although I raised a ton of money for inner city blacks when I was in the left. I still raise money for inner city charities, but that hasn't changed. But of course, if you couldn't blame white people for the problems of black people, then Julian Bond and Jesse Jackson, Kwesi Mfume, not to mention Mr. Sharpton, would be out of work. They'd have to find something productive to do. And that is a serious, that's a serious question and a serious problem.
I don't think what David Horowitz just said can be said too often. As a matter of fact, it must be said by more and more people, because then and only then, I think, will we see an end to this planned divisiveness. Anyway, we'll take another brief time out, then get back to our phones.
While we're off the air, let's show the folks the book.
Thank you for calling Select Quote. This is Peter Sprankle. How can I help you?
I don't know. Hi, Peter. It's Tom Bosley.
Hello, Mr. Bosley.
Peter, why should I buy a life
Do we have any
insurance
lives
policy
at
from Select
6?
Quote instead of the guy around the corner?
Do we have any?
Many people don't like the
No
idea of a
lives at 6?
salesperson coming into their home.
Any
Also,
what?
the number of choices you get from a local agent is often very limited.
How's Select Quote different?
First off, everything's handled over the phone. And we're impartial. We searched the pick of over 1,700 life insurance
You see where
companies.
Jim Brown blames
Well, give me an
a
idea of the
racist
savings
judge?
Select Quote delivers.
Jim Brown, the football player?
Yeah, I've been on the road, so what happened?
He blames a racist judge because they found him guilty,
Isn't it time you
and
called?
no jail time, 400 hours of
Community service.
400 hours of community service.
Life insurance.
He said, I'm not going to go picking up trash off the freeway.
1-800-967-3532.
Put him in jail.
Or visit our website, selectquote.com. Available in most states.
Executive Director of the
There he is.
Jim Brown rips racist judge.
On August 11th, Bill Clinton called for new restrictions on the rights of
I hope the judge isn't named Horowitz, because David Horowitz is a judge in L.A.
Yet on that same day, Bill Clinton offered clemency.
She's got two things against her.
Members of a radical organization.
She's white and she's a female, so therefore she's prejudiced against black males.
Including 3 New York City police officers. At the same time he was holding honest American gun owners responsible for the actions of deranged criminals, Bill Clinton was putting violent terrorists back on our streets. Unfortunately, it's a familiar pattern.
She's the CEO of a radical and extremist group of white upper-class women who target men of color.
Prosecutions for federal gun law violations have plummeted.
I hope she throws them in jail for that.
Strict enforcement of our existing gun laws, not more restrictions on honest firearm owners. Call today, 202-225-3121, because prosecution is prevention.
He's talking about himself in the third person.
I get cramps and I get a headache and I get really irritable.
They get that way, you know.
Studio City, California takes
So that must mean he's really,
I really trust
really up there.
It takes care of the cramps and the irritability.
Unlike ordinary pain relievers, Pamprin combines the same maximum strength pain reliever found in Tylenol with safe and effective medicines for relief of
I
bloating.
mean, I'm not going to be reviewed in the New York Times, so what we want to do is...
I
show
like
people
that copy. Remember the copy of the Standard that came out? It had Your Face and Whittaker Chambers.
Yeah.
That was a great
up
issue.
on my wall. Yeah. My Day in the Sun.
Contains no hydrogenated oil and no trans fatty acids.
And you're writing for, I see your byline on a lot of things.
It's part of the healthy diet and exercise program. It gives a great buttery taste to toast and your cooking. So forget about your butter or margarine. Smart Balance sings. You're going to love it.
Smart Balance.
Can I ask you something? Do you smoke cigarettes? Then you're probably hearing voices when you smoke, right? Come on. This is Buddy. You know the voices I'm talking about. You're in your house. You're about to light up, and you hear this angelic voice.
Buddy, light up outside for your kids.
Then this devilish voice comes in.
Buddy, your dad smoked in the house when you were a kid, and you're fine. Hey, who's perfect?
Don't ignore the facts, Buddy.
You don't expect people to believe all those reports. They say putting your gum on the bedpost overnight is harmful.
Buddy, if smoke's not good for you, how good could it be for your kids?
Oh, that's a low blow.
Buddy's a father.
Okay, but what if Buddy goes out to smoke and Bigfoot steals his shoes?
What if his kids got one less ear infection or lung infection this year because Buddy smoked outside?
Okay, we'll smoke outside. Tomorrow.
Today?
Tomorrow.
Then I go outside to smoke, and the voices stop. Listen to yourself. Go out for your kids.
Brought to you by the Consumer Federation of America Foundation, AMA, and EPA.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue with David Horowitz, and David had to leave our studio here for a moment, and I don't know whether he got lost or not, but those of you who will be watching on C-SPAN will see an empty chair, but shortly he will be filling that empty chair. The book that I mentioned before as the book we interviewed David on upon its publication last week, published by Spence and entitled Hating Whitey and Other Progressive Causes. Now, in this book, which is not one of these great big thick volumes with a lot of wasted verbiage just thrown in there to impress people, it's a book that is lean and it gets right to the point. It is my view that if enough people, and I'm not, I have no interest in the book, I don't get a commission, I'll have to do something about that. But I really believe that if a lot of people would read this book, they would have a better understanding of what has been going on and is going on in this country. Because we have all, and I notice this all the time, we've gotten ourselves into a mindset where we feel guilt, and we don't know what we feel guilty about. I don't. And David certainly doesn't. And as you can see, if you're watching C-SPAN, David is back and listening to us on the radio.
So have at me.
All right. Let's take another call, this time from Chatham. It's Greg. Go right ahead, Greg.
Well, good afternoon, Bob Grant, and greetings, Mr. Horowitz.
Hi.
I'm holding in front of me a very proud new owner of your wonderful book.
Can I ask, where did you get it and how?
Well, I called last week. I called the manager of the Devon, Pennsylvania, which is near Valley Forge National Park.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Barnes & Noble bookseller.
Oh, great. And did they have a copy?
The manager was very nice. She special ordered a copy for myself.
Yeah. That was what I was afraid of. I mean, the last time I was on, I made a big appeal. This book could not find a publisher. It's had a very hard time getting into the stores. I need all the help I can get. If people there would just call your local stores, whatever it is, Walden Books or Borders or Barnes & Noble or your independent bookstore, and ask them to, if they don't have the book, why don't they? My last two books, sold 70,000 hardbacks, tell them. They can make money off it. It's been very hard to get this book into the stores. There's a certain resistance, shall we say, out there. I need all my friends to give support to this book.
All right, thank you, Greg.
Wait, he didn't answer his question.
For you.
Yeah.
Oh, did you have a question, Greg? Go. I thought
Yes.
when you people do that, when you say you want to ask a question, but then you talk about something. In this case, it's not really tangential, but you talk about something that's distracting. Go ahead.
Well, I have some very good news for you. I also was able to inquire as to the ordering of copies for the store, since mine was the only one in the store at the time I picked it up.
Thank you for that.
Now, I want to say that there are 2,000 copies on order in their computer system in their National Distribution Center in Jamestown, New Jersey, and apparently the title has been corrected in the Barnes & Noble computer.
Right.
Now, something interesting, though.
So wait, just for our C-SPAN audience, it was called Hating Whitney in Books and Print, so nobody could tell where the book was.
Apparently that's been corrected,
Great.
at least in their regional computer system. I don't know if that's nationwide, but something very interesting. My copy was shrink-wrapped.
Yeah, no, they're all shrink-wrapped. So are my copies.
Okay. Well, very good. I'm looking forward to digging in and reading it, and
thank you.
I thank you very much for taking a stand on this issue.
And thank you for your help. I appreciate it.
Let's go to Brooklyn right now. And first-time caller Mike checking in right now. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Listen, I just want to bring to your attention relative to your discussion. Were you aware of back in December of '97, 4 New York City police detectives were arrested for beating a Brooklyn man?
Nobody in the country was unaware of that.
Are you familiar with this?
Yes.
Okay. Just for the callers, 4 detectives were charged with beating and assaulting a man and firing weapons at him. And
this is not the Abner Louima case?
no, it's not.
Oh, no.
That's why I bring it to your attention.
Yeah,
Because
no. Okay.
This came on the heels of the Abner Louima case.
Yeah.
And I thought the city was going to explode because it turned out my thinking was that they were white cops and he was a black man. But indeed, they were not white. They were black.
Oh, and they were black cops.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's what my book is about, the double standard. If a white man is lynched by blacks, are you aware that in Boston, in the subway, a group of blacks knifed and killed a white man, chanting "Shank the Honky" as they did it? Did you hear that
No,
story?
I didn't. No.
I only know it because I was on the Howie Carr show in Boston. Yeah.
Well,
it's okay to hate and kill white people.
The article,
but it's a national, it's a day of national shame when it happens to a black person. And, I think a crime like that, it should be a national shame, but so should it be when a white person is lynched just because he's white.
the reason why I bring it to your attention, too, is it came out in the New York Times in September of this year on a holiday weekend, and they have the 4 officers' photographs in the article.
Mm-hmm.
About a week or two later.
Well, I'm surprised they did that because they have reported other race crimes against whites by blacks without ever mentioning the race, and you'd only know it if you had read it in another paper. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was a year later, about 9 months after the incident. And again, given the Abner Louima media coverage and the lack of coverage in this incident, it's very telling about what's going on in the media.
Well, don't forget, if O.J. Simpson had been white and killed his black wife, and, do you think he would have got off? Do you think he wouldn't have been hung within 2 weeks? I mean, they would have convicted him and electrocuted him is what would have happened. It's just mind-boggling to me that people can't see the obvious here.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike, and then we also have the spectacle of the Amadou Diallo situation coming up. I want to point something out in case some people are confused, because you're trying to be logical and you hear what David is saying and you've heard some of the things I've said, and you might be confused. Why are people so afraid? Why is the struggle for true equality, for an end to the double standard, why is that not being successful? In my opinion, the answer is that people like myself are demonized, are marginalized. We are declared null and void because they call us the R word. And once we're called the R word, two things happen. We're held in opprobrium, and even fellow whites distance
They're
themselves.
afraid. Well,
Have
look,
you noticed that?
There's a great intimidation out there. I mean, one of the reasons I wrote this book this way is because people are intimidated from saying what's common sense and speaking the truth. They're afraid of being called racist and being killed. I mean, publicly killed. And, of course, it doesn't work the other way. Hillary Clinton can kiss the ring of an anti-Semitic racist, as Bill Bradley has kissed the ring of an anti-Semitic racist, a convicted liar, a man who has ruined people's lives, using racial epithets. I'm speaking of Al Sharpton, who incited an arson in which 7 people were killed. This man, it's okay for Senator Bill Bradley to go and kiss his ring. It's okay for Hillary to stroke him and pay homage to him. But it shouldn't be okay. I mean, I'm not saying, but it's certainly, if any politician went near, say, David Duke, who was a perfect analogy to Al Sharpton, they would be dead. They would just be dead. What Bob is saying, and what this acts is, I just met with the board of editors of Time, and I was pointing this out to them. My great sin was to have written a column saying...
All right, hold that thought. We'll have to leave it right there. Hold that thought. We're in suspended animation, ladies and gentlemen, but then we'll be right back after this quick break. Right there, I've got to hear about what the guys from Time, I got to hear about that.
If you're diabetic with eczema or extremely dry, cracked, rough skin, you've probably tried all kinds of skincare products. Some of them worked, and some didn't work. Try NatureMed topical ointment from DMC Pharmaceuticals.
It's the commercial break. Let's hold up the book so they can see it.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. Hating Whitey.
I'm shameless, but, hey, I'm not going to get reviewed in the New York Times, folks, so...
Especially for diabetics with cuts, nicks, or other wounds.
Also, I'm not making, I'm not making any money off this book. I've donated it to my center.
Actually helps to keep your skin healthy. Plus, it reduces the risk of severe traumas to skin that can lead to more serious medical procedures.
How do we look, Bob? How do I look? How does the book look? Whatever.
It's a good
He's shooting there.
The hating is written in red.
NatureMed topical ointment? Look for NatureMed
Brings it out.
diabetic care section of all
Good.
Walmart pharmacies. Walmart and DMC
Excellent.
together promoting healthy skin for diabetic and non-diabetic patients now.
Pan on to Bob, so I want to go and look.
Executive Director of the NRA.
Well, we'll do something really dramatic. I'll walk right into your camera.
Politicians in Washington are up to their same old tricks. Rather than insisting on enforcement of the tough gun laws
They're
already
gonna be
on the
able to
books,
see that,
they're
actually.
taking the easy way out, calling for new restrictions on honest firearms owners. Don't let their spin fool you. There are tens of thousands of
let's
laws
zoom in on
regulating
it.
guns. But under the Clinton-Gore administration,
Can you see it now?
those laws have been virtually ignored.
You want to leave it
In
closer?
1998,
Where's
where's that stand? Give me the stand.
Just leave it up while we're...
You got the stand?
to felons. For discharging a firearm in a
Just
school
give me
zone,
the
they
stand.
prosecuted only 8.
No,
Now
no.
the White House is
the
demanding even
book
more
stand.
gun control laws. But why should honest firearms
Yeah,
owners
yeah.
pay the price for the Clinton-Gore administration's failure to enforce the tough laws already in
There you go. Perfect.
Congress. Tell them to
No?
demand
No good?
enforcement
Well, you
Does that
shaking
work?
your head.
Back it up a little.
Too close?
More
Too close?
restrictions on honest firearms. Call 202-225-3121. Call today because prosecution is prevention. Paid for by the National Rifle Association.
Amazon.com
Hey.
now has auctions where buyers and sellers get together every day. The following is a message for sellers.
Want to sell your waffle
Trying to remember
irons,
where I
rare
was now.
China
Oh,
patents, discontinued yo-yos, buffalo nickels, choo-choo Charlie hats, superhero comics, handmade doilies, rookie cards, or wood chimes? Amazon.com now has auctions.
And now a message for buyers.
There are people selling waffle irons, rare
What do
China
we got?
patents, discontinued yo-yos, buffalo nickels, choo-choo
Any
Charlie
hostile
hats,
callers? No hostile.
superhero
What's that?
Any hostile callers?
handmade doilies.
It's hard to tell. He doesn't. He just puts the name and where they're from.
Oh, where are they from?
I tell him to put anti-callers, and he knows this. In any event.
Where are they from?
Well, let's see. We've got somebody here from. We got Bob from Brooklyn, George from Queens, Jimmy from Brooklyn, Anthony from the Bronx, Hal in Atlantic City.
A remarkable confluence of time, space, and majesty, which has given life to more than 10 million species. An amazing place of truly amazing grace. We are caretakers for the preservation of this earth. Our mission is to ensure diversity is preserved, for from diversity comes new food, new cures, new life. We are World Wildlife Fund, almost 4 decades old and more than 1 million members strong. With your help, we can keep this planet in a state of grace. Please call for your free action kit with 10 simple things you can do to help leave our children a living planet. Call 1-800-CALL-WWF.
Any hostile callers, Roy? Any hostile callers? Let's get back to our telephones here with David Horowitz, author of Hating Whitey and Other Progressive Causes. Here's Bob.
Wait. Don't you want to hear about the editors of Time?
Yes, absolutely.
I had a meeting with the editors of Time, and what I said to them was, look, here's an issue, which there surely are two sides to. I mean, here's the NACP. This is what I brought down the lightning on myself. I got called a racist for questioning the NACP for suing gun manufacturers because too many young black males are murderers. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I was called a racist. I said, if you, meaning the Time editors, suppose you wanted to have had an opinion like that, you would have to think twice before you open your mouth, because there were people who come down on you and smear you and drive you out of public life. And that's why people walk around on eggshells about these things, and they don't say the obvious. What is the NAACP doing, defending criminals? Why are they defending, saying there's too many blacks in jails? That's racism. There's too many blacks in jails because they commit too many crimes. And that's a real problem that has to be dealt with. We cannot have a sensible dialogue on race as long as one side is going to call the other side racist, no matter what they say. That's only, all that does is an attempt to, all it is an attempt to shut people up. And that's why I've got to survive, and this book has to survive, for the sake of the editors of Time, so they can have free speech. That's why I'm doing it.
All right, Bob in Brooklyn, you're on the Bob Grant Show with David Horowitz. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello, Bob. How are you? And how are you, Mr. Horowitz?
Hi.
Yes. Now, listen, I've called Bob Grant Show several times, and Bob can tell you by the tone of my voice since I've talked to him, I am not a racist. But I want to ask you a question. How can you put out a biased book like this saying that the black people hate whiteys And without saying, wait, let me finish.
Go ahead.
And without saying that equally white people hate blacks as well, and even more so. Let me give you one example, or two examples. I am a man that came from the South about 52 years ago. I'm an eyewitness to the fact that there have been hundreds of black people hanged, murdered all sorts of ways in the
Hundreds?
South. I came to
You
New York.
watched hundreds of lynchings?
Yes, sir. I came to New York. I find there have not been one single white person killed by the policemen. There have been a lot of black people killed.
You didn't hear the caller.
By black.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
By whites. And now, as I said, I'm not a racist, but I think you ought to come up with a little more objective book than that. Just to pretend that
I know
blacks are the ones that hate.
Bob, you've criticized
I know that you haven't read the book because the book is not about black racists. The book is about racists, or the part of the book that is about race. For example, in the introduction, I attack a group of university professors who call them who are grouped around a magazine called Race Trader. They're all whites, and they are inciting white people to be what they call a traitor to their race, as positive act. And the whiteness studies in the university, which is all taught by white people, is about how horrible whites are and how oppressive they are. Are you from Brooklyn? Are you living in Brooklyn now? Because in Brooklyn, a white man named Yankel Rosenbaum was lynched by a black mob, and the killer who was caught, who confessed, who had the murder weapon on him, who was identified by the dying man before he died, was acquitted by a black jury, a black and Puerto Rican jury, and the jurors then had a party with him. And there are lots of lynchings of whites in America today by blacks that are not reported as hate crimes and generally not reported. I gave an example earlier of Shank the Honky in the Boston area. But the main thrust of this book is to say we cannot help inner city blacks, particularly, for example, the kids who are not doing well in school. If we concoct this imaginary idea that there is an institutional racism keeping them out of college. What's keeping them out of college is they score poorly on the tests. The reasons for that, are probably many, but they're certainly not are white people standing over their shoulders, forcing them to score poorly on the tests. And they also are not rigged tests. There's a lot of nonsense spouted in the civil rights movement about culturally biased tests. Vietnamese kids who, came to this country, probably their parents don't speak English. They come from a very strange, to America, culture. American culture must be very strange to them.
I'm going to have to leave it there.
They score well.
We're going to have to leave it there, Bob. I thank you for the call. I suggest you get the book and read it, and maybe you won't condemn it, although I doubt it. Anyway, let's take one more quick break, and then we'll conclude with our guest, David Horowitz, on The Bob Grant Show.
Keep the Connection, brought
Well,
to you
this
by
is a very healthily supported show, Bob.
Green.
One of the best overall exercises is based
He saw hundreds. The guy came here.
He saw hundreds
52 years ago. He saw hundreds lynched.
Benecol is
I
He
saw
said he
some
came north
statistics.
52 years ago.
Yeah.
in clinical studies to help promote healthy cholesterol
But
levels. And it
people-
starts
I don't think there have been
Don't
any
believe what they want to
lynchings,
believe.
properly speaking, since the
Believe what they want to believe.
40s.
Now you can find Benecol in the dairy case of your local supermarket.
You don't need fancy equipment or expensive
I think
diets
I'll
to slim
call
down.
Brian
In fact,
Lamb
my top
a
exercise
racist.
choice for people who want to get fit is
Why would
walking.
you want to do that,
Walking is a
Bob?
highly aerobic
Brian
exercise.
Lamb, who
He's
prides
such a
himself
sweet man.
on being the most apolitical person in the history of the
Try
world.
walking 15 consecutive minutes, then add 1 or 2 minutes a week until
Ah.
you're walking a total of 30 to 40 minutes. For Keep the Connection, I'm Bob Green.
For a healthier you, join us for Keep the Connection, weekdays on this station. Brought to you by Benecol.
This is like those things like at the book signings that the C-SPAN does, where everybody's milling around, nobody's really saying anything. And
I think Time Warner, doesn't Time Warner own C-SPAN?
No, C-SPAN was created by all the cable companies as a public relations thing, and Brian Lerner has turned it into a great service.
They contribute, okay.
Yeah, they do. They all fund, all the cable companies fund C-SPAN.
Hey, buddy, listen
And,
up.
you know, I think that Brian Lamb and his, as you say, his balance and his non-political attitude puts public television to shame, which is just, you know, public broadcasting service is just a subsidiary of the Democratic Party and the cultural left. You know, liberals do not know how to be tolerant. Well, they're not liberals. They're leftists.
Heart-to-heart. Get Slowman.
Just the way they're not progressives, they're reactionaries. You know, they control the language, so we speak it.
Academy of Dermatology and Dr. Drew Pinsky on the link between acne and depression.
And let me also say that depression in adolescents manifests differently.
How's Larry Elder doing out there?
#1 talk show host in Drive Time. It's doing great since we did our campaign.
Diving, truancy, irritability.
We're close. We're close.
Changes, drug use, sexual acting out. These are all signs. They may not complain of sadness. They may not complain of anything. You may just see irritability and anger. But the manifestations are different, and people need to be attuned to that.
Dr. Daryl Regal of the American Academy of Dermatology.
There's no need to be depressed. There are things that can be done to make it better. Nothing here is your fault. With acne, nothing is your fault. There are treatments you can do, but it's not your fault. And I think that's probably the best message we can get out, that we can make a difference, that dermatologists can make a difference in treating this disease.
For more information on how to treat and cure acne, call the American Academy of Dermatology at 1-888-462-DERM.
My watch must be fast. Oh, it is.
We got about a minute.
A minute.
I don't know. We have such limited time. Let's see if we can squeeze in Hal from Atlantic City. You have a question for David? Go ahead.
Yes, David. There's been some minor victories as far as getting discrimination out of state government and colleges. Do you see any hope for people, the millions of white males working in private industry?
No. No, of course I do. Look, what's required is for people to stand up, to stop being, don't be afraid of being called names like racist or bigot. Stand up and, you know, use your heads and speak common sense. If something is ridiculous, it's ridiculous. If something is unfair, it's unfair. If something is extortionist, I mean, there's a lot of racial extortion going on. There's a talk show in Los Angeles, the Mark and Brian show, and they put out a promo offering people black hose, which was garden tools that are black. You know, this would be very insensitive, except if you listen to any rap song, they're infinitely worse, and nobody complains. It's called a double standard, and we've got to stop this.
On that note, we'll have to leave. David Horowitz, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
And straight ahead.
Hey, that's it.
Yeah, you know, ABC got sued on that. ABC owns
I know.
that.
And they're going to give them money.
ABC owns that station, and they got sued.
Of course, it's
I
extortion.
don't understand the basis of the suit. I don't understand it. You know, that flag.
They got a lot of trouble. It's like Texaco.
Yeah.
You know what it was? It was
David Horowitz is the author of many books, including Radical Son, A Generational Odyssey. He is also president of the Center for the Study of Popular Culture. Hating Whitey is available from Spence Publishing Company.